up till now, whichever mechanisms in the movements that has been adopted and that has been done in India up till now, obviously the people are also going to be continuing that, and they are not just going to forget that. So for example, swadeshi and boycott, that was also done. Then there was the idea of passive resistance, plus there was the aspect of, that passive resistance was done, plus boycott of the British textile and all of those things, they were also done. So that is going to be what some of the methods are going to be adopted. Okay, that is there. So here the non-cooperation, it was done also in two phases. Okay, the two phases we shall be discussing it in the coming lecture. The first phase and the second phase, that was there. And when the non-cooperation Khilafat movement was launched, there were three major goals that were adopted as a part of the non-cooperation and Khilafat movement. There were three goals. Now, which were these goals? The first goal, it is going to be that the particular Jallianwala Bagh massacre should be addressed, and Jallianwala Bagh massacre and the Hunter Commission should be addressed. We do not want another commission to be set up which would again prove to be a whitewash. We do not want that. Second demand, second goal of the non-cooperation Khilafat movement was to address the Khilafat issue. All right, why? Because the Congress had a lot of issues, so that then the All India Khilafat Committee had a lot of issues, so the Khilafat issue. And the third goal, it was the aspect of Swaraj. Swaraj, that means self government. Swaraj, that means self government. So this is how the non-cooperation movement, it is generally going to start at this particular point of time. Okay, so that is going to be there. So what I want you to do is, I'll give you 2 minutes, okay, to just grasp whatever things we right now did. Okay, take 2 minutes and grasp all the things. Grasp the contents, my dear friends, grasp the content, because whatever I just explained, in history everything is all about transition from one event to another, the continuity and flow of one event to another. So that is what is there. Okay, so you need to be aware about things like this. So here, that is the transition that I'm talking to you about. You need to do the interrelations, you need to do the transition, you need to focus on what events happened when and how did it impact to another, and that led to another event happening. So the UPSC, it focuses on such major dimensions. All right, so this is there. Now let us continue ahead. Here, when we talk about the Khilafat and the non-cooperation movement, Here, what is going to be the background of the Khilafat non-cooperation movement? So what happened during the 1919 to 1922? The British, they were opposed through two of the mass movements that happened in India. That is going to include, that is going to, cross the religious barriers that was prevalent, and it was to cross the religious divide that was also prevalent between the Hindu Muslim. And these two mass movements, they are going to be known as the Khilafat and the non-cooperation. And through these mass movements emerged a separate, though these mass movements, they emerged from a separate issue. Separate issues means what? I just explained those. Okay, Khilafat emerged from separate issue. Non-cooperation, it had a separate issue of all the things that was there, and then both were clubbed. So they adopted a common program of action, that was non-violent non-cooperation movement. So here, when I'm talking about non-cooperation, that is what I told you, it was in two phases. In the first phase, that is going to be for the initial years, the non-cooperation khilafat, it is generally going to be from 1920 till 1922 time period. So the first phase, that is going to be from 1920 till 1920, till 1922's first month, means initial years, 1922 first first part. Okay, so during this point of time, generally non cooperation was done. However, in the second phase, that is going to be in the 1922, there was the idea that there we shall be adopting to civil disobedience. Okay, so the second phase, it is going to be inclusive of disobedience. However, that is only going to be for a few days, so that is the reason that is not that important. Means we cannot rename the event. Okay, it was just for a few days, so that is why we'll majorly call it non-cooperation. It is non-cooperation only, because for 2 long years there is going to be the non-cooperation that is going to be there. All right, so that is going to be the scenario. Okay, so that is what I am trying to tell you. Here it was two phases. Now, the background to the two mass movements, they were provided by a series of events after the First World War, which belied all the hopes of the government's generosity towards the Indian subjects. That was one another thing. Okay, why? Because when I just elaborate the statement, what do we know here is that in the World War One, okay, in the World War One, the Britishers, they also wanted the Indian support. Because now many of you might wonder that why did the Britishers always wanted the Indian support? Because in the British army there were also the Indian soldiers, and it was on the basis of these Indian soldiers that provided numbers to the British army, which helped the British win the war. Now just remember that these particular soldiers, they would also have some aspect of political ideas, right? They might also be following some of the political leaders. And if the political leadership of India at that point of time did not support the British, and if told that all of the people from the army, you, all of the Indians, all of this religion, you guys, just resign from the army. So how many? Not all, but many would have resigned, right? So that is why the Britishers during the World War One, they could not just sideline the Indian politicians, because they kept the Indian politicians in one hand. They did not suppress them at a major level, and they told the Indian politicians that do not worry, after the war is over, we will give you some things, but for right now, you guys just support us in the war. That is why the moderates, they supported in return, with a point of view that in return, after the war, they would get what? Some form of reforms. The extremists, they also supported with the view that in return they would get some form of self government, and the revolutionaries wanted to use this as an opportunity. So the Indians, they somewhat supported it. But however, when the war ended, they gave us the Montford reforms, which we never wanted, which was yet another step for oppression. So that is what is going to make us disillusioned with the reforms. That is when we are going to lose all the hopes from the British. So this point is a mention of that we had understood that there is no generosity of the government towards the Indians. So this was the back